Welcome to Inside the Mavs. Kevin Gray, Mavs Insider for 105 through the Fan, joined as always by my partner, Grant Asseth of Mavs SI. Appreciate you joining us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast for free. Make sure you give the podcast a 5-star rating and write a review while you're there. You can also watch this on YouTube as well, my YouTube channel at Kevin Gray Sports. Really appreciate you joining us, taking a listen and a watch to the podcast as we continue to grow here. You can find me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports. You can find Grant on Twitter at Grant Asseth. Grant, what's going on? How you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty well. Looking forward to talking about the Mavericks before the draft. Not too much time left to be able to do that.
That's right. A lot to get to as we are just a few days away from the NBA draft as we record this. So excited about our guest today. Terrific writer for Yahoo Sports, senior NBA reporter for Yahoo Sports, the No Cap Room podcast on the Ball Don't Lie network. Jake Fischer joining us here on Inside the Mavs. Jake, what's going on? How you doing?
How you doing, guys? I looking at my phone a lot because the texts are flying. It's draft week. So we could pop on and talk some Mavs for 10 minutes and then you're gonna get on with the draft. So yeah, what's up? How can I help? What service can I provide for you today?
Well, we'll just spill it all. What do you got? What's the latest from your end on what the Mavs are doing, what you're hearing, and some of the things that will pique Mavs fans' interest as we're just a few days away from the draft?
Yeah, I mean, as I've written so far in a couple of stories at yahoo.com or yahoosports.com, the Mavs, I think, are looking at a variety of options, but I think a lot of this is going to come down to who ends up being actually available on the board at number 10. I think that's going to be the case down this draft from number 5, where Detroit could really be a potential trade down candidate, to Dallas, and then Utah at 9, and OKC at 12, and New Orleans at 14, Toronto. I mean, there's just a lot of opportunity for teams to move up, to move down. It's all going to be dependent on who's there. So for Dallas, I don't think it's dependent on who's there if they're going to pick a guy. I think that'll depend on what type of offers they actually get when they're on the clock. So one team I've definitely gotten confirmed has been the Atlanta stuff that we've written about, where there's been something around 15 for 10, where it's either John Collins or Clint Capella with Davis Bertans going back to the Hawks. I don't know if that is something that can get over the finish line, because both sides have told me that just was preliminary and didn't really go too far. The rest of it, we'll have to see. The other teams that have been mentioned as teams that are looking to move up from there. Utah keeps getting mentioned. Brooklyn's got picks 21 and 22. Indiana's down at 26 and 29. So those are the teams that I know are at least definitely looking to move up into that range, but there are obviously going to be more. And the more that happens here as we get closer, the more we'll be able to tell you guys publicly.
Go ahead, Grant.
In terms of potential draft prospects that are generating trade interest, what are some names that could motivate a team to trade for the 10th pick from the Mavs if someone was to fall?
Yeah. There seems to kind of be, it's not a consensus top 9, but there seems to kind of be that a consensus 9 that's going to go in the top 10, if that makes any sense. So you got your big 3. Then after that, there's kind of this tier of, everyone in the league is pretty much pinpointing Amen Thompson to Houston at number 4, but I'm gonna just group him into this tier of, you've got the Thompson twins from Overtime Elite, you've got Cam Whitmore from Villanova, and you've got Jarris Walker, Taylor Hendricks, and Anthony Black. That's kind of the 9 out of the 10. I feel like those 9 are going to go in the top 10 to me in some order. There's definitely opportunity for someone else to jump in there, whether that's Kobe Buffkin, who has been a hot name, whether that's Derek Lively, who's been a hot name. I don't think Derek Lively necessarily is the target for Atlanta. That's been the rumor that everyone in the league is talking about. But that could be a spot that teams who want to get him feel like they have to get to, because he's someone that a lot of players like. Bilal Coulibaly from Metropolitans 92, who's Victor Wembanyama's teammate. He could be a player that teams want to trade up for at 10 to get. And I mean, it's a ton of different. It's all about preference, but I think, there are swing pieces where like Washington could pick. But like all the intel suggests Washington's going to take a guard. So if it's Anthony Black who's there, and two of Kobe Buffkin and Jalen Hood-Schifino are available, like I could see a lot of teams wanting to go after those two guys. So those are a couple of names just to come off top of the head.
When you look at where the Mavericks are position-wise, whether they keep the number 10 overall pick or they move it, what are you looking at in terms of how their free agency outlook, namely with Kyrie Irving, and what that is doing for their decision-making process, given some of the things they're trying to improve with this roster at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone there is definitely working with the mindset that Kyrie's coming back. Anything could happen between now and July 1, June 30th at 6 p.m., excuse me. So I wouldn't take that home to the bank by any stretch, but that's where they're functioning. So, I mean, from there, I've heard a lot about, front court pieces. And, I saw Michael Scotto put up an article out in Hoops Hype that had pretty much, I mean, those are the names I've heard as well. Grant Williams, Harrison Barnes are two. And I mean, Clint Capella, we know they asked Atlanta for instead of that John Collins situation. So it seems like they're kind of looking in that light, which is also why I think that the Derek Lively stuff is popping up in terms of, trying to connect prospects to them as well.
With that, is there a name that we aren't talking about that maybe we need to put on our radar if you're a Mavs fan looking at the situation that we haven't necessarily discussed yet, given what they're trying to do at this point?
Not right now. Let me see if I pull up my notes if I have anything. Mavericks. Mavs. One thing I'll say, don't get your hopes up on Draymond Green. I know he is someone that has been linked to Dallas in the past, and I think that is absolutely a home that he was looking at as a potential opportunity if things were going a different way in Golden State, or if he needed some type of leverage from Golden State. But I'd be surprised if he ended up anywhere not Golden State. So that would include Dallas, like any other team.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess. I'm drawing a blank on what I was going to ask. Sorry about that.
You're good, man. It happens to me on the phone every day.
In terms of like potential teams looking to trade up in the draft, Oklahoma City at number 12, they have a lot of assets to work with. Are there any other teams beyond like like the Thunder, the Hawks, that could maybe trade in above the Mavericks, or with the 10 or to the 10 pick, that maybe not have been like kind of floated out there as much so far leading into the draft?
Yeah, I mean, Utah at 9, like they're talking about trading up, they're talking about trading down. So that's definitely a thing to keep an eye on for Mavericks fans. And the Mavericks are keeping an eye on it too, because if all of a sudden 9 is a hot spot to trade into, that's obviously one spot above them. And that could potentially take someone off the table for Dallas to trade for or trade with, excuse me. So, I mean, the Thunder, I could see, of course, they could trade up. I haven't heard them as a trade up team necessarily. I've heard more about them being a team that could trade down. Other teams that could trade up to 10 or 9, besides the ones you've mentioned. I mean, the Lakers, I think, would have interest in getting up that high. I just don't know what they have to really make it worth Dallas's while. Golden State is a team, but I think they would like to get up higher than 10. I think if there's an option for 10 there for them, I don't think it would really get them. From what I'm understanding, I think they're trying to get, if the Warriors are going to move up with Jonathan Kuminga, it's going to be, well, a little bit higher than where Dallas is right now. But if that's something that works out, where it's a bigger situation, because there's a lot of cards on the table for both teams, I wouldn't be shocked. 19 to 10 is a pretty big jump. But I'll say this, from what I've been told, from who I've been told Golden State will be targeting there, I don't think 10 would make, I don't think that player will be available at 10. I'll say that. Last one for me, as we sit here today, a few days away from the NBA draft,
what do you believe the Mavericks are going to do based on what we know now, the information that we have, and what they're trying to do with this pick and the amount of different things that they could do with it? What is your feeling telling you right now?
Yeah, they're going to trade it. If Dallas is picking at 10, I will be absolutely floored. I don't know if it's just going to be for a straight, we're trading 10 for this player, if they're moving down, if there's a little other, shuffling with it, but they're going to trade this pick. I think there's just so much opportunity for movement. And they're at a pretty prime position, I think, in order to get something of value back, whether it is something like that Atlanta thing or something with Utah, what have you. So I would take it to the bank that Dallas is going to move this selection.
Well, there you go. Jake Fischer says, look, take it to the bank. Mavericks moving that pick. So we're going to make sure we tag you when we see when that happens. Jake, tell the folks where they can find you and the work that you got going these days leading up to the draft, man.
Yeah, we're at Yahoo. No Cap Room podcast on the Ball Don't Lie podcast network. We have a couple shows in that network. I'll be on Kristen Peak's draft show on Wednesday. So yeah, just going to be in this room, calling people, texting people, trying to piece together all the dots for the next, 72 hours. So yeah.
Well, we sincerely appreciate you taking a few minutes with us here on the Inside the Mavs podcast. As we know, you got a lot going on right now. So for you to carve out some time, we really appreciate that.
You asked early enough. You asked like 3 weeks ago before I got inundated and had to start telling people no. So
early bird gets the worm. So we appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I'll see you.
All right. Really appreciate Jake Fischer for joining us on Inside the Mavs today. Of course, you can find Jake doing his thing for Yahoo Sports. Incredible work that he's doing, obviously leading up into the NBA drafts. We really appreciate him taking a few minutes with us here on Inside the Mavs. Of course, Kevin Gray of 105.3 The Fan, Mavs Insider, Grant Afseth, Mavs Insider and reporter for SI. Obviously, Grant, a lot to react to there from Jake with respect to especially his last thought of, look, he believes that the Mavericks are going to trade this pick, and really sounded fairly confident in the ability of the Mavericks to trade that pick on Thursday night for the NBA draft. Your thoughts on what Jake had to say, given the confidence in which he said it with, given what the Mavericks are trying to do here?
Yeah, I definitely think that's been something that a lot of, maybe not like take it to the bank necessarily, but a lot of reporters have seem to have a lot of confidence in the Mavs, either trading down or out of the pick. Between the Bojan Bogdanovic, with the Pistons, with like Tim Hardaway plus the 10th pick for Bojan and the 31st pick as a reported framework that was discussed, and the Atlanta Hawks trade down scenario with Bertans plus 10 pick for either John Collins or Clint Capella plus the 15th pick. It seems like there's definitely motivation to get win now help, which makes a lot of sense. But it's always interesting to see how draft night plays out. There's names, that a lot of people are high on that, surprise, like how did that guy fall? It'll be interesting to see if anything like that happens where it's like, okay, well, I didn't expect him to be available. So maybe that changes the, the whole trading landscape for sure. It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, definitely a lot that can take place between now and obviously Thursday night. There's a lot of confidence, I think, for Mavs fans that something is definitely going to happen with respect to the pick being moved, because I look at the depth of this draft, I look at the Mavericks' needs, and I say, I think the best way to maximize, because here's where I'm at, maximizing value for that number 10 overall pick. Do you feel like if you're keeping it at number 10, you'll be able to maximize your value by keeping the pick and drafting there? Or are you going to be able to maximize that value by moving off from the pick and maybe acquiring, a center? We talked about Clint Capella. We've talked about some other trade ideas, but also still being able to pick in this year's NBA draft, because I think that's the sweet spot for this team is if you can not only get some veteran win now help, but also still be able to get a young piece in this draft. And let's say Atlanta's willing to play ball with you at 15 there, and you can remain in that top 15, top 17 range there to still get a quality young player. I think that's the best way to maximize the value, given just the amount of things that the Mavericks are trying to do. We've talked about it before. The amount of, win now help, the amount of capital that you're trying to utilize to maybe go get that win now help. your number 10 pick is your best asset, and you've got to find a way to maximize it. And for me, the best way to do that is find somebody, find a trade partner, and then be able to get some win now help, but also still be able to make a pick in this year's NBA draft.
Yeah, definitely. And it seems like a lot of thought, like early on in the draft process, like fresh out of the season before the combine really got going. It seemed like there was like some thought that maybe there wouldn't be this like intriguing player, like super motivating for teams to trade up to 10 for, where it kind of felt like this kind of purgatory spot in a sense, where it's like this doesn't have amazing trade value, and maybe the player we would ideally hope falls isn't going to be there. But it seems lately like there's a few draft prospects that seem to really be picking up, with the draft stock, like Kobe Buffkin, the guard from Michigan. Jake mentioned to us, and just other reporters as well, that like Washington moving off of Bradley Beal, maybe they're intrigued by the idea of taking Kobe Buffkin or Anthony Black, and if a guard goes in the top 10, then maybe a forward falls one spot, and that one spot could be the difference between like a who knows, like a Taylor Hendricks or something along those lines. And it seems like another player that's kind of gained steam as of late in reporting is Derek Lively. Rafael Barlow was very high on him. I think we did that about like 3 weeks ago. About a month ago, a little less than that. Yeah, and he was pretty adamant about him being a great option for the Mavs with the 10 pick. And now it seems a lot of teams are agreeing with him after getting a closer look. And I saw Bleacher Report's Jonathan Wasserman. He even said that 8 through 14 range, that he's not going to fall out of that range. And there's teams motivated to trade up. And they might need a trade above 10 to be able to select him. So those are like just off the bat, two names that didn't necessarily have that like significant hype, if you will, that are now getting that like increased or intensified like buzz, before Thursday.
Yeah, that's incredibly interesting when it comes to Lively there, because obviously he provides you with some rim protection, the ability to rebound, still questions about whether or not he can shoot the basketball with some regularity and consistency and what that looks like for him. We know the production for him at Duke wasn't necessarily where you wanted it to be, but you could project him at the next level of being that lob threat, that ability to roll to the rim. Luka would obviously love someone like that. And we've heard reports with Mark Stein talking about with the Mavericks not going to be bringing back Christian Wood in all likelihood. Also with that remaking the center rotation. Now, what that looks like and what that means, if it means Dwight Powell maybe not necessarily coming back or having a more reduced role in terms of a backup, it sounds like whether it be McGee being moved on from, Powell being moved on from, this center rotation is going to look much different. And maybe the centerpiece is a Derek Lively there at 10 if he is there and available for the Dallas Mavericks to be able to make and remake that center position, given the athleticism that's required, especially if you're trying to find a center that's going to be able to play a little bit of drop coverage, defensively be able to have multiple facets within his defensive game. You've got to find an athletic center who can do some of that, and maybe the Mavericks feel like Lively can provide that to them. And as you mentioned, Rafael Barlow was mentioning that to us a few weeks ago. So it's very interesting that name, and this is where we get to this time of year, especially a few days away from the draft, is that some of these names start to move up for whatever reason, start to move down for whatever reason. It sounds like Lively is one of those names that may be starting to move up for whatever reason, given maybe some of the skill set that he presents and what teams are looking for in today's NBA.
Yeah, definitely. And I thought it was interesting today that Mark Stein also like included in his Substack that, NBA personnel that he's talked to have given comparisons of Tyson Chandler to Derek Lively as well.
Oh boy. Okay.
And so like,
that'll get Mavs fans excited there.
Yeah, for sure. So like, there's definitely, Tyson Chandler sized buzz that's going on.
That's good. That was good. I like that. That was good. Yeah. Look, we all know what Tyson Chandler meant to this franchise and helping them win an NBA championship. And Tyson Chandler, great defensive center for a long time in this league. So again, you're hoping there's a little bit more offensive upside with a Lively as he continues to grow within his game. But if you're talking about that kind of defensive comparison already and what that could project to at the next level, if you're a Mavericks fan, that should make you pretty good about what his potential could be. And again, going back to the idea, if they're going to be remaking the center rotation, that Lively could be the piece in the middle there that really jumpstarts what the Mavericks are looking for from a defensive, and hopefully his offensive game continues to grow there. Because for me, and I've talked about this before, is I want to see this team be able to build from the inside out. Obviously, you want to be able to have guys that guard on the perimeter that can guard and switch and be switchable pieces on defense. But we saw it during the NBA playoffs, your ability to have a center that can anchor in the middle, whether it was Anthony Davis with the Lakers going to the West Final, Bam Adebayo in the East with the Miami Heat going all the way to the NBA Final, even Nikola Jokic to a degree as the playoffs went on started to show much better flashes defensively as well. So we saw this throughout the course of these playoffs, your ability to find yourself a center that, yes, offensively can have some playmaking ability and those kinds of things, but more importantly, anchor your middle and then being able to play inside out from there. It just shows, it looks like in today's NBA that the big man is coming back in a way. Joel Embiid, don't even want to forget about Joel Embiid and all the things that he does as well. Your ability to have a switchable big man to be able to do multiple things on both ends on the floor is extremely important today.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something I figured I'd mention that I just kind of saw. Apparently, like in terms of like impact of like, the picks before the Mavericks at 10 that could impact how things play out. Just a couple things that I thought of. On ESPN, I believe, it was Jonathan Givony. He said that Cam Whitmore appears to be slipping some ahead of the draft.
Oh,
and
boy.
Workouts haven't been great, and they're going to ESPN is going to mock him to the Jazz at number 9. So remember what Jake mentioned to us is that Utah has a lot of like potential outcomes with draft plans, and
sure.
For all we know, who knows their view of Cam Whitmore? If he was available, maybe they stay. But who knows? Maybe there's other teams that are in those teens range or have the draft assets that could be motivated to trade up right in front of the Mavericks. I think another team as well that kind of just thinking out different scenarios. The Indiana Pacers at number 7 seems like they want some like win now, sort of like forward help. OG Anunoby, like those types of names. They could be of interest as well in reporting that I saw. So there's a lot of different outcomes that are going to be interesting to kind of track as prospects rise and fall, and just different trade outcomes. Because like literally in the span of a couple of days, we just had Bradley Beal end up on the Suns, and now we're like, Kobe Buffkin now could go at number 8, or Anthony Black at number 8. So yeah, it's going to be a very interesting time, especially with that second tax apron taken into effect, after the new league year flips on July 1st. So, some teams may want to like hurry and get some trades out of the way before that new calendar year gets going.
Which is why we saw the Bradley Beal thing come together as quickly as it did, because the Suns were like, look, we need to get this in before the new collective bargaining agreement kicks in. And then we're the ones dealing with all the second tax apron and having a bunch of, 4 guys and then a bunch of other dudes from the G League, filling out our roster, given what we have. But that's interesting. That's an interesting note on Cam Whitmore, though, out of Villanova, and what that could mean for him and his draft prospects moving forward as well. So, look, it's just a tip of the iceberg, given all the things that we see happening here over the next few days when it comes to the NBA draft. Obviously, the Mavericks are going to be at the center of all of this, given the fact that they have what may be a desirable pick there at number 10, and what teams are going to be willing to do to get up, maybe past them. And let's see who the Mavericks are able to play ball with. But, I've said this before and I'll say it again. This is the most consequential offseason for this team for the next, at minimum, 5 years. They have to get this right this offseason, because it's going to tell us a lot, not just about their ability to roster build around Luka and presumably Kyrie coming back, but also some young guys when it comes to Jaden Hardy, Josh Green, and how some of this roster will have to start to turn over as well. We start looking at Tim Hardaway Jr., Maxi Kleber, Davis Bertans getting off of that contract, how you decide to move on from him if you decide to do that. JaVale McGee. There's a lot of players that could be on this roster now that we look at in maybe 3-4 weeks from now that we see completely different on this team. But the biggest thing from my mind is they have to get this right, because if they don't, it's going to have ramifications for years to come when it comes to Kyrie, but most importantly, when it comes to Luka Doncic and his future here.
Well, I think we might have had a foreshadowing. A wise man, the last day of the season, named Jason Kidd, he said there'll be a lot of new faces, or many new faces, on this team. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how it all plays out in the next little while. But yeah, I think overall it's going to be very, very pivotal offseason. You said it's kind of interesting because last offseason I remember a lot of people were in their commentary were saying the same thing. It's just crazy how like the pivotal moments kind of keep stacking up. And if you retain Kyrie Irving as planned, it'll be interesting to see how they kind of lock in that supporting cast core, if you will. With Josh Green, as you said, needing that contract extension in the relative near future.
Mm-hmm.
At least they have in terms of like insulation of load management or injuries, at least Jaden Hardy was brought into the fold last offseason to be able to step into a larger role. It'll be interesting to see how they address that rim protection, wing defense. Like there's a lot of
There's
needs.
so many things. So many things.
Not a lot of assets to get it done. So yeah, I think in the early part of the offseason, it was interesting. We were thinking about how creative the team would need to get. And at least like those frameworks, like trading down from 10 to 15, that was actually, I remember us talking about that as an idea before it kind of came out in reporting. So like they're going to need to be creative for sure. And it's at least intriguing to see that has already kind of transpired a little bit with trade talks. And it'll be, very, very interesting to see how that actually like plays out on Thursday for sure.
Anxious times for the Dallas Mavericks. The NBA draft just a few days away. A lot to be sorted out between now and then, but Thursday is going to be one of the most pivotal days in Mavericks franchise history, given what could be happening with that number 10 overall pick and what it means for the future of this franchise. Grant, tell the folks so they can find you, especially the coverage that you're going to be doing this week, specifically in DFW when it comes to the Mavericks and their draft night as well.
Yeah, for sure. You can find my written work at dallasbasketball.com, and I'm going to have a lot of updates. On Thursday at the draft, Nico Harrison, I'm assuming Nico Harrison will speak with reporters, I believe, before and after the actual, draft, from Dallas. So I'll have updates from that, and then I'm sure we'll quickly get at it with a Inside the Mavs episode reacting to all the things we've been talking about for possibilities for about a month. It's crazy how much we've done in about a month. Starting the show for sure.
Yeah, and that's huge. We appreciate all the support of obviously the podcast as well, all the reactions. Everybody jumping, mentions for us on Twitter. We really appreciate it. Hopefully that you're continuing to enjoy the podcast. With Grant being there at the Mavs facility, I'll be on air actually that Thursday night on 105 through the Fan. So we'll be able to have live reaction on my radio show, The Get Right, from 7 to 11 p.m. And then, as Grant mentioned, we'll do an emergency pod right after the draft is over with. He has done with his coverage there. I'm getting off air. We're going to be dropping an Inside the Mavs podcast, immediately reacting to everything that happened on draft night, which should be an incredible Thursday night for the Dallas Mavericks in the NBA draft. Regardless of what happens, there's going to be a lot going on. Also, special note as we get ready to get out of here on this episode of Inside the Mavs, new episode, not just dropping today with Jake Fischer that we had. So excited. Tomorrow, new episode dropping with Kevin O'Connor of The Ringer. The NBA's Ringer is going to be dropping tomorrow. Kevin O'Connor of The Ringer, with all of his terrific knowledge across the NBA. He's going to be joining us on the podcast tomorrow. So look for that to be dropping as well, midday tomorrow. So you'll be able to look out for that. So we had Jake Fischer today, Kevin O'Connor of The Ringer tomorrow. And then, of course, we'll have our emergency pod on Thursday. So a lot to look forward to here on Inside the Mavs. Again, really appreciate all of you supporting the podcast. And again, you can find it not only on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, but also on YouTube as well, my YouTube channel, at Kevin Gray Sports. So again, really appreciate the support of the podcast. It can't wait to continue this week of coverage as we lead into the NBA draft on Thursday night. That is it for this episode of Inside the Mavs. Again, download the podcast wherever you get your podcast for free. Give it a 5-star rating, write a review of the podcast while you're there. You can follow Grant on Twitter at Grant Avseth. You can find me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports, doing my thing for 105 through the fan. Of course, Grant doing his thing for Mavs SI. Follow us for all of your Mavericks covers throughout the course of the rest of the week. Until tomorrow, we'll talk to you later. Peace.